What is up, Benzinga? Are we still awake? We got it in us? All right. Very excited to have this conversation with y'all today. This is High Spirits, Reshaping Social Consumption in the Hospitality Space. My name is Ricardo. I'm going to get us kicked off with a little bit of a story. I'm in PR. I was talking to a journalist a couple months ago. She was writing for USA Today on the best cannabis weed lounges in America. Of course, I gave her some of my favorite spots. I gave her some of my client spots and recommended that she check out some new spots that were just opening. And when her piece came out, it was kind of surprising, at least to me. It appeared under the headline, "These 6 cannabis lounges and bars should be high on your list." And of the 6 lounges on that list, most are rooted in the regulated market, but one stood out. It's called Buds and Brews in Nashville, Tennessee, where you can order THC-infused mayonnaise and a 32 milligram pot brownie. So yes, the social consumption space looks a lot different than the last time that we gathered here. And we're going to dive deeper into that today. With that said, I'm going to pass it off to my panel for some very brief personal introductions, getting started with my friend Diana here.
Hi, I'm Diana Eberlein. I'm the chair of the Cannabis Beverage Association and also the VP of Marketing and Business Development with Source Technology, a water-soluble emulsion tech, primarily known for the work in their beverage space.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Black. I'm the CEO of Cheech and Chong Global Holdings. We have a lot of products both in the regulated and non-regulated market.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm David Mukpo, co-founder of Pamos Beverage Company. We operate in both the regulated space and the hemp THC space across the country.
And I'm Rachel Burkhans. I'm the founder of Smoke Sip Savor, which is an experiential consultancy focused on consumption and beverage. And I'm also on the food and beverage chair for the Cannabis Hospitality Coalition, which is a newly launched nonprofit, designed to support advancing regulatory opportunities for license holders in the consumption space.
Thank you, friends. And lastly, I'm Ricardo Baca. I'm the founder at Grasslands. We are a PR and marketing agency working with y'all, with the cannabis and psychedelics industries. Very jazzed to be here. Panelists, we have a legal permitted weed lounge opening in Vegas. I'm sure you read the news about smoke and mirrors these last few months. Very exciting. Especially since Vegas is the capital of tourism and hospitality in this country. We also have various models of regulated lounges rolling out from Chicago to Detroit to Denver. But what do each of you think is the single most interesting thing happening in social consumption of cannabis right now? What's really getting your attention? Diana, you want to get us started?
I don't know how we don't all say beverage in this instance, but it's a very different. The way we are defining hospitality is not necessarily focusing on the consumption lounge model as it's been traditionally defined. We want these low-dose, whether it's hemp D9 or derived from marijuana, we want low-dose THC beverages to be available where alcohol is able to be purchased as well. So when we think of hospitality, we think of how we get these products in arenas, hotels, restaurants, bars, living next to as another alternative to adult beverage.
It is pretty exciting. And it's a familiar format, right?
Yeah.
Jonathan?
I couldn't agree more. I think the beverage format is probably the most exciting one in this space right now. I think everybody's accustomed to going to, whether it's a concert or a ball game or anything, and having a beer or a beverage. And if you start to get into that format and see a different alternative for people from alcohol, I think that has definitely a lot of possibilities to grow. And you're seeing it too in how people are responding to alcohol versus cannabis right now. The cannabis market is only really getting started on how much of the market share it's going to own by the time this is all said and done. So being able to get the mainstream consumers into a format that they're accustomed to is highly important, right? And so, I'm not going to be able to talk my mom into rolling a joint, but I can talk my mom into having a beverage, right? So these are the things that make a difference, I think, is the familiarity of the mass consumer and what they've been doing for years, on the beverage format. So that's what I'm very excited about on the hospitality side.
Well, it's so bizarre that this whole thing is rolling out simultaneously to a dip in alcohol consumption and a rise in non-alc options, right? David, please.
Yeah, you nailed that. I mean, and I think that we obviously all have a pretty similar viewpoint on how beverage fits into the market. And I think certainly from a regulated space, seeing high quality lounges that are sustainable launching in the regulated space is fantastic. And I think is going to be a critical piece of the industry moving forward. But as far as the most interesting thing, certainly without a doubt on my end, it's seeing the level of adoption that spaces typically reserved for alcohol are having towards low-dose THC beverages. I think it is a combination of what is a very clear demand from consumers being met with operators having the capacity to do it. So the first level is the adoption, and then the second level is the results, is that they're finding, everyone we work with finds that when you put THC beverages next to alcohol, the sales dictate that you continue doing it. So I think it's just we're really reaching a tipping point with the level of adoption that's just going to increase over the coming year.
I'm curious what you're seeing with that, David, especially as it relates to Pamos. What kind of adoption are you seeing when your product is put next to a similarly alcoholized canned product?
It turns, I mean, is the short answer. And I think that it starts from the first conversation, then it flows down, right? When we first said about specifically on the hemp-derived side of the business, which is obviously where we have more flexibility to talk to people, whether it's live sporting venues to bars in popular cities, we thought that we would have to go through hundreds of conversations to get yeses. But the first step is when you present to people why you're doing it and what you're putting in front of them, the most common thing we get back isn't no, it's how. And I think that the beautiful thing is our industry has a tremendous amount of high quality operators who are doing this the right way. So it's giving people peace of mind that it's not, this isn't a loophole. This isn't something that people are trying to get by. It's something that is a genuine tool for anyone who's looking to increase their bar sales by providing an option that meets consumer demand looking for less alcohol.
It's so compelling when you think about it. I'm sure y'all have seen the same photo that I have. I think the first time I saw it was on your LinkedIn, Diana's LinkedIn, when it's that total beverage end cap, right? All weed beverages in one of the largest big box retailers of alcohol. It's a pretty compelling argument.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big domino to fall in this. I mean, we have Specs entering the market in Texas. You have Total Wine & More carrying these products and rolling them out in multiple states. We are hearing reports from other retailers saying that THC beverages are outselling any single varietal of wine, outselling vodka. Those are big numbers, and something for a category that's entered the market recently. To see those returns, of course, this is going to continue to be in more demand.
Bonkers. Rachel, we're coming to you. What's the single most interesting thing happening in cannabis hospitality right now from your perspective?
Hemp THC beverages, which we've already obviously covered at length here. But what's really exciting is that beverages have been the tip of the spear to open an entirely new channel of on-premise application. And because we're working with people who understand beverage and understand hospitality in that bar restaurant channel, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. They already have systems of service and models and operational procedures set in place for those businesses to be successful. So when we're looking at the regulated lounge channel, we know there have been a lot of problems in that category through the years. There have been a lot of ways operators have had one hand, both hands, and a leg tied behind their back. So opening this up to an entirely new set of national, potentially, operators who already understand what it takes to build a successful hospitality business and what their margins on a drink on their menu need to look like in order for their business to be successful is a little bit different when you take 280E out of the equation. So bringing this to a more established and routine category of hospitality operators who really understand what to do with the beverage category and letting them do what they do best is really going to bring this more broadly than we could really ever have penetration in the regulated cannabis lounge channel.
Rachel always has such a thoughtful way of expressing herself, and I do want to shout out, you can read her musings on and product reviews on Buddhist, a new app. Check it out. But of course, the elephant in the room has already been brought up, and that is the booming hemp D9 industry, which is radically transforming and propelling forward this construct of social consumption of cannabis hospitality. Diana, how are you and your colleagues at the Cannabis Beverage Association planning to maximize this opportunity, but also to differentiate hemp D9 from weed D9?
Sure. I mean, I think candidly, the hemp versus marijuana conversation is a temporary one. We are talking about THC beverages, and we need to make sure that's very clear so that the consumers aren't getting confused about what they're consuming and that this is an intoxicant that we are selling. With the Cannabis Beverage Association, we represent both sides of the plant. What's unique about beverage is that we are very unified in how we feel about low-dose beverages and where they best perform, which is outside of the dispensary channel. As a result, we are able to, define low-dose THC beverages, 10 milligrams and under per single-use product, and say, let's carve that out and let that be available in the mainstream market, the Total Wines, the Specs of the world. Let that really change how people look at THC, how they look at cannabis as a whole. And then also, as people get more familiar with this format and they realize what their tolerance is, or as their tolerance grows, they will also then feel more confident going into a dispensary to get a higher dose product, which might also lead people, again, feeling more comfortable with cannabis as a whole, to also try other products. So there's an opportunity for this category to change the perception, as a couple of these other panelists have said, to change the perception of cannabis. So this is an opportunity. And for an industry that's used to pivoting, this is just another pivot that we can learn from.
Hell of a pivot. And speaking of maximizing an opportunity, Jonathan, David, that must have been an amazing pivot when you recognized, okay, we're already on the regulated market. Should we go into this other channel? Can you share the backstory on how you made the decision to jump in?
All right. So we had products on the regulated side in California and other states, and we also had a D2C scenario with CBD, right? And what we wanted to do was shorten that bridge for those consumers, and we wanted to come up with some formats that could use and generate that customer, obviously not just in a CBD or a Delta 9 product, but also into cannabis, right, and back and forth. And so that really presented an opportunity for us to shorten that gap between a CBD product and a THC product, and it gave us those legs to be able to optimize those customers and optimize obviously the fan base of Cheech and Chong, which is pretty massive, into products and trying new things. And so we wanted to make it as commercial and easy as possible for them to have something, enjoy it, try it. Low dose obviously is something that is definitely what we're targeting, but we've gone up in doses and we're all over the place on that. But it's great to be able to bridge that gap between THC and CBD, right? And be able to use the commercial market. And like you said, Total Wines and everybody else that's coming on board, this is a way that we can continue to scale, balance our business and balance our books, and bring the brand. And ultimately our goal is to get a product into every consumer's hands, a Cheech and Chong product into every consumer's hands. So this really gave us that opportunity, opened the door wide open for us.
Yeah, the short answer for me is I was later to the game than most people. When I first started to look at this side of the industry and specifically, it felt like a loophole. I didn't want to dedicate too much of my bandwidth to something that I didn't think had staying power because it felt more cash than value accretive. And then you start to see what's happening at the state level, and it became very apparent to me very quickly around the middle of the summer that this would go from a loophole to a true platform for us to give more people access to affordable THC. And when we then actually flipped that switch and started operating in it, realizing the reception we got, again, from people who typically reserve space for alcohol, was the most energizing 2 months of my career in seeing what it really looks like when the product you've developed found a home that it fits into naturally.
Quick follow-up for both of you. I know you said you felt late to the game, David. What if somebody out there is contemplating a similar move? Are they too late to the game, or would you say go for it?
I would say that you're never too late to any game. you should always take advantage of whatever you're passionate about. I would say that everything looks easier from the outside than the inside, so it takes a lot. You need to be well capitalized. You need to be in a position where you've got the right distribution networks, but I would never discourage anyone from jumping into a space. You're never too late to be successful.
Jonathan, anything to add?
I couldn't agree more. I think that's exactly it. You know, do your research, make sure you're capitalized, and follow your passion, right? It's important because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, it's not going to last very long when you take those first few hits. Your walk away.
Diana, y'all are accepting new members? CBA?
Always. We have a lot of initiatives focusing on federal education as well. We want to get this in front of the TTB for future regulation, you know, using their foundation with alcohol. That infrastructure already exists. This would allow for us to properly regulate and tax these products and make sure that safe products are available to the consumer.
I love it. I want to go to you, Rachel. You had mentioned in our prep for this, this panel discussion that infused beverages, more so than edibles, are the ideal product for a thriving cannabis hospitality sector. David, you also said something that I loved, and I'm going to steal it. You said that there's nothing, having a glass in your hand is the most ubiquitous thing in the world. So can we talk about why beverages are going to be the format that ultimately fuels cannabis hospitality? Rachel, why don't you get us started?
I mean, look around at all these tables. Everyone has multiple beverages in their hands, around them, with them all the time. Consumers really understand what to do with this category and how to use it. So that really makes it a much easier barrier to entry in general than something like flour or concentrates that might be incredibly intimidating or even unappealing to certain segments of consumers. And then when you bring that into the on-premise model where people are consuming this in a licensed, operated space, you know, there are some concerns in terms of the safe service of these products that you need to be mindful of from a insurance standpoint and from being able to just be a safe and respectful operator. So edibles, we all know, can certainly take some consumers out who may not be familiar with that form factor. And just the low dose, rapid onset nature of this low dose beverage category that we're seeing is really particularly suited for something that people are going to be consuming real time in a place where an operator is concerned about the safety of their liquor license and they don't want to have issues of overconsumption. Some of the licensed retail lounges have had quite a few cases of overconsumption, many of which are driven by high-dose edibles or even dabs and concentrates for people who aren't used to taking that form factor. So if we're understanding consumption spaces as somewhere where literally anyone can go in and explore a product in a category that maybe they haven't had before, going with a safe, low dose, and highly trained approach where these operators are fully able to understand and train their staff to convey to their guests how these products are going to make them feel first and foremost is always going to be the most important thing we can do as an industry to help advance this on-premise development, because consumers know what to expect from a glass of wine. They know what to expect. They know tequila might make them a little crazy and gin gives them a hangover or whatever. So how do we train them to understand where THC beverages fit within their own personal consumption? That needs to happen in the on-premise channel, because right now, in just that liquor store model, when's the last time anyone walked into a liquor store and had an amazing in-depth conversation about the mash bill of the bourbon they're buying? Maybe at a specialty retailer somewhere, but that's not the common experience. So when you get to have a face-to-face interaction with a highly trained professional in a hospitality-led environment, that's where brands are built. That's where bourbon brands are built. That's where the guest gets to ask really dorky questions to their bartender about the distillery. And the very active and informed and educated service hospitality professionals that we see in bars and restaurants, consumers are really inclined to pick that information up and become ambassadors for the category and ambassadors for the brands that they're serving and selling by talking to the guests directly in a way that we really haven't been able to do super meaningfully in this industry yet.
And I would like to throw out, I mean, especially with the increased accessibility with these products being in Total Wine and in front of a consumer that might not understand dosages of THC, even understand how THC will impact their body, education is crucial. We need to educate our distributors, our retailers. I know as a supplier and as, of course, with the CBA, we are always getting on phone calls so that we are explaining what these products are and how they can best explain it to the consumer. We need to make sure that that is available to them also at retail, because let's face it, if you don't know what to expect and it's, you take a 10 milligram beverage, which for some people does, have quite an impact, that's an undesirable experience at that point. And we don't want to go back to where people feel like, oh, this is like edibles in college where it's too much for me. Yes, these are more sessionable with a shorter, more consistent duration, but you can still create an undesirable experience because of the lack of education.
Couldn't agree more with both of you on our role as educators, but I think that on the flip side of that, as far as how it fits into the social setting, I think it speaks to two things that are going in the same direction. The first is how we consume beverages in general, and the second is the beauty of this plant. It doesn't have to be the destination to be the star in the same way that alcohol often isn't either. The best use of cannabis is to enhance whatever experience you're experiencing at that moment, and providing the ability for people to have that access to that plant in an environment where they're doing whatever they would normally be doing actually is the first time we're able to see it as a true analog to alcohol, because it gives them the flexibility to not just have one experience and then go into their other experience, but the same thing, we don't have one drink at the start of a bar and then have that carry us forward. It's your companion through the evening. So I think from a social setting environment, it's really changing the way we're able to consume.
It totally is, yeah. Jonathan, anything else to add on that subject?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing when you have a beverage, just outside barbecuing. I mean, we went boating with the beverage, and the enhancement of the experience was just amazing. And being able to control the consumption of it, right? Like, just from that format, being able to drink it at your pace, right? And stay within what you want and understand the dosage is huge. So yeah, back to education and educating distributors and retailers and people about the product is super huge, because if they have one bad experience that gets out, they tell 10 people, it becomes a problem, right? Whereas a lot of people are having such great experiences and coming back to us, and seeing that stuff is amazing. I was out watching a soccer game and I saw, not only our product in one lady's hands, but I saw, Cycling Frog's product in someone's hands. And so I was just kind of blown away, right? Because generally you would see people sitting at these, high school games and stuff with like a beer or whatever else they may have. But this was something different, and it was heightening the experience. And it was really great to see that, low calories, no hangover, like just a different pace. And I think it can just do so much in people's experiences and their relationships and their engagements with others in this format of beverage, that I'm just always every day blown away by what we're hearing and what we're seeing.
It's pretty dumbfounding when you think about it. I was a journalist for 24 years. I reported on the implementation of the regulated market for the Denver Post. And now as a marketer, just witnessing the mass normalization that's happening right now. And cannabis hospitality plays a very substantive role in that. A question for the whole panel. John, I want to start with you. We talked about needing a sessionable analog to alcohol. That's big. And you mentioned on our pre-panel call that, hey, Cheech and Chong has a 50 milligram beverage, and that 50 milligram beverage is probably not right for cannabis hospitality channels, and that's why you have, what is your flagship? Is it a 4 milligram product?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's a 5. Microphone, there we go. So the 50 milligram one is a THC product. It's only sold in California. It's called the Chicholata. Luckily, they were smart enough to put a cap on there that you can hold it back and recarbonate it when you can't finish the whole thing. So those are great products, and people like those products, right? That's something that's more, to someone who uses a lot of THC, it's more our drink's not going to do as much for them, right? And that drink does a lot more. And so, but the mainstream usages of our drinks, our high and dry product is really, the 5 ml is what we're shooting for, yeah.
It's interesting. I reported on the implementation of Colorado, and I remember when those regulators said a single dose of edible cannabis is 10 milligrams, which, as we've seen, has been generally adopted by most state governments. But a question for the panel: what's a single dose of maybe a cannabis beverage, especially as it relates to this hospitality, social consumption conversation?
I think that a room full of people who operate in the cannabis space know that there is no answer to that question. There is no standard dose on my team, let alone in the country. I think, and the problem here is no matter what I say next, it pisses one person off on either side of the spectrum. So I can only speak for myself and how we operate our company, and that the first answer is everyone has a different dose, and we need to give everybody access to that dose. The second is it doesn't always have to be in the same place. From my perspective and my brand, I know everyone has a different feeling, is anything over 10 milligrams per dose, I think is fine to be in the regulated market. Right. And anything 10 and under is fine to be in liquor stores. And I think that the only thing that can stop this subsect of the industry, but I think in general, all of us, is people having a bad experience and that affecting how regulations are put on us. So my personal perspective is 10 milligrams and under should be a dose that's available to anyone. 10 milligrams and over for a dose is something that should be held by the people who have put a lot of work in ensuring that high dose products are handled safely.
Couldn't agree with you more. That's exactly how we set it up. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how the Cannabis Beverage Association feels, and because we represent both sides of the plant, anyone who's been in cannabis long enough knows low-dose beverages don't perform well typically in the dispensary channel, so this should be one we're kind of willing to let go and use it as a gateway for people to get more familiar with cannabis. I echo what David said about the dosage, and there is no perfect one, right? We're all different, but we do recommend, start slow and low. The 2.5 milligram products out there, you should start with that. We have to educate on that, and that's something that we are working with our retail partners, is how do we get that information, also with hospitality, how do we get that information in front of them at that point of sale so they know what to expect? So, and that also goes for hospitality, and Trail Magic in Minnesota very early on, they were one of the first to really start posting, I feel like on LinkedIn where we'd see all their content. They had cards on their tabletops at their bar, or they had a cider or a tap room. They had signage there explaining what the experience was. And I thought, wow, they've already gotten ahead of that. And that's really what we need to make sure is happening at hospitality facilities, as well as at retail point of sale.
And Rachel, you have a lot of interaction with consumers, which is so huge because sometimes we do get sucked into our own echo chamber, and it's like, oh, well, I can take down 25 milligrams in edibles, no problem. But for the general consumer, especially somebody who's walking into that place I mentioned earlier, Buds and Brews in Nashville, Tennessee, what have you found is a good starting point? Is it a 2.5 milligram beverage? You can have another and another, or is it more like 5?
I start everyone at 2.5 if they're not aware of their dose. They can always go up. You can't go back. So I think that also from an operator perspective, you want to be able to sell more than one. So if you sell somebody a 10 milligram drink and they're done after half of it, what are they going to do? Where else are they spending their money while they're in your hospitality environment? So creating low dose beverages at the 2.5 level for hospitality, where folks can maybe order 2, 3, 4, depending on their dose, is a really great way for operators to also make some margin on this category.
Interesting. Okay. Well, since we are here at the Benzinga Cannabis Capital Conference, which is a bit of a tongue twister, I do want to make sure that we're addressing of course, our investor friends in the room. And a question for the panel: are you encouraging your investor colleagues to put their money into this cannabis hospitality sector? Interpret that however you may, whether it's the place, the location, the lounge, or yet another beverage that might be served at these kinds of lounges. Do you think these are good investments in this current climate?
I can tell you just from the conversations here that this is what they're eyeing most. There's not a ton of convincing.
What part of it?
I will say there's a lot of people interested. I mean, obviously I'm with Source Technology, so the technology that's powering a lot of these beverages, people are interested in getting involved in that segment. But there are a lot of people learning about brands, trying to figure out if this is, a category, if there are certain brands they should be getting involved in. This is a category that went, in Minnesota alone, from 20 SKUs to over 200 in a year. So there's a lot of products out there. But I would, recommend take a look at the brands. Who's built a lifestyle, a storyline that's associated with their product? Because that's who is, going to rise to the top. I think that's what we're going to see over the next year or so. And I think, those brands will build consumer loyalty, whether it starts on e-commerce and then goes into retail. But that's really a lot of what I'm hearing is on the tech side, as well as, people want my opinion on specific brands. I love them all.
Speaking of lifestyle brands, shout out to you and your team, David. We held a Grassland Supper Club in Vegas during Champs 2 months ago, and Pamos was going around the table, and it brought on the vibes, and really like the lifestyle brand that you're building. But please, the rest of you, how are you recommending to your investor friends to, yes, invest or stay away?
I'll jump in quickly. Thank you. I appreciate that. Based off my conversations over the last 24 hours, I don't think we need to be suggesting anything to anybody, is the first thing. I think that the energy around the investments in this space are already palpable. There's no one size fits all. I think that the opportunities are only going to increase, but from what I've seen, there is a lot of money available in this side of the industry. It's just people figuring out what the right place to go with it is.
In terms of the operator side on the regulated lounge channel, I definitely think, I know I've said it's very challenging, but I still think there are quite a few opportunities as that evolves and certainly moves into other states. Everyone's watching what's going to happen in New York. Michigan has some interesting programs that are running out for consumption. And of course in California, I am working with a few of the West Hollywood license holders. If anybody does want to have that conversation, please come find me. But I think also it's going to be really interesting to watch traditional hospitality and traditional beverage as they look to invest into the broader hemp THC market and what that looks like on the national restaurant and bar sort of landscape. So I think there will be quite a few opportunities coming there as this category evolves.
Jonathan, close us up.
Yeah, I would just be looking at the brand and the people, right? If I'm looking at an investment or encouraging someone to invest in something, it's really the people, the operators that make the big difference, right? All the time. Make sure you know them, right? Make sure you know the brand and know their capabilities. Thank you for having us.
Thank you to the panel. Thank you to all of you for being here. So appreciate it. Happy Benzinga. And please come up and catch us afterward. Have a great rest of the show, everybody.